So I'm gonna just shoot from the hip. There's really no script or no scrolling letters or anything telling me what to do. So I might ramble a little bit here. I tend to do that anyways in life. But one of the things that I get to do in my life that I've always planned on setting up was the freedom to help and the freedom to give back. And it's a really hard thing to do when you're scrambling, trying to constantly make rent or constantly make car payments or constantly deal with issues and problems. So it doesn't mean I don't have all of that stuff. It just means that I figure out a way to manage it the best way I can. And one of the places, there's a few that I give back to. I'm not going to name it by name, although I'd love to. I think they deserve all the credit in the world. But I think their anonymity is important because they deal with a lot of broken, not broken, a lot of that's a wrong word actually. A lot of kids that have been dealt a tough hand, more than a tough hand, and and same thing with animals. And they combine those two things. And people who know me know what I'm talking about or what place I'm talking about. But what we say there at these places, what we go through, is something that stays there. So I want to be highly sensitive to that and make sure that there's never that the anonymity stays and is always protected and sacred. So having said that, there's a lot of themes that continuously resound through my brain, and I go to sleep at night and I think about these things, and it's just the level of belonging and where they feel like they fit in the world. And it all starts with parenting, of course, but a lot of them don't have parents. But even the ones that do, who find themselves in these situations, here are these things that basically I think we as older people and generations tend to forget. Um, when I was 10, I made a pact with myself because I used to get in trouble a lot. Well, I was, you know, when you're a latchkey kid and your both parents are working and they're trying to make the bills and they're trying to. My dad had three jobs at once. My mom was working at a health food store in Cambridge. They and then a leather store. I mean, we were constantly we were behind the eight ball constantly. There was times when I remember that they would go to cocktail. My mom would go to a cocktail party, and I was asking, "Well, how could you possibly go to a cocktail party? We haven't eaten dinner yet." She said, "That's how we're going to eat. I'm going to bring back the little finger sandwiches and bring them back to you guys." And so I'm not trying to compete in any kind of intersectionality Olympics here or any kind of street cred stuff. I'm just telling you, I thought there would be a time when I would grow old and I would be able to not relate to my kids, and that scared the crap out of me. So I made these mental notes growing through my teens, especially. The 20s were kind of a blur, as most people in their 20s do, but I have some good memories there as well. And so I could now relate to myself during these times back in those days, and I can listen to these kids talk, and they're bringing all these memories up, and I'm able to relate to them. Although I'd love to just jump in there and talk about that stuff. It's really their time. It's their time to get this up. It's the therapy starts with them at least being able to start talking about it. So, with that having been said, hearing things like my parent, I never had to deal with this one. I'm going to make this clear, but there was one child that said, one child, he's 17, going to be 18 very soon. My dad just doesn't like me. He just tells me flat out, I don't even love you. So the only reason why you're going to stay here with us is because you're my blood. And the mom supports this is because that, and you'll have a roof, but that's going to be it. And so this kid, how does this kid not turn to the streets? How does he not turn to people who say, I got you, bro. I got your back. I'll love you. In their sick way, they use these kids, and before you know it, they're in gang life. So I don't really reserve judgment for any of these kids. I'm not going to get into the weeds on all this stuff. I just wanted the general messages. There's a plan and there's a way to get out of this, and I think this organization that I'm referencing is definitely one of them, and there's a million of them out there. So there's some good people doing a lot of good things, and it doesn't succeed. Doesn't guarantee anything. What guarantees is the continuing idea that they have a route. And so I've always thought about life in a situation where we're on this crazy map of our life, which is the world, and there's all these intersections and these traps everywhere, and we're always trying to get to wherever this place is that we all want to go, and that might be different from everybody. Everyone, of course, it's different for everybody. Everybody has their own idea of what their utopia is, or what they consider the meaning of their life to be fulfilled. And so I might outline some of my stuff. Doesn't mean that that should be yours, but it just should mean, in order to find these places, to know where you're going, you have to know where you're standing. And how the hell do you know where you're standing when we're constantly burying our head into these, or we are relating to other people with these devices, and we are resorting to escape the pain of the day, I guess, rather than facing it, through self-medication at a time when the brain is still developing. The hard work comes from, well, just that hard work, the stuff we don't want to do. How deeply do we want to look inside ourselves and find out what we really want and how to get there? And then we got to even go deeper, darker, to find out where we're standing. And sometimes when I say darker, we find out that people in our lives, people we care for deeply, people we count on, are actually keeping us there. They're holding us down. Another good way to look at it would be, imagine you're walking into this cell every single day. It's a cold, dark, walled cell with no windows and a big metal gate. Well, you can freely walk in there. You can get lost in your world, put your VR head glasses on, just go someplace and then forget about everything. And then you're ready to come back out in the world, you can walk right back out. Well, the longer you teeter in and out of that cell and you don't grow, you become someone you don't even know, and then you find out that door's closed on you. And then what do? The key's gone, you're stuck in there, and you lose hope. So if you're in your 30s and you're living in your parents' basement and you're playing Xbox and you have no desire for anything in life, we have to do some major rewinding here and figure out how the hell you're going to get out of this mess, because we're humans. We need people. So when we get into this place of despair, there doesn't seem to be a solution to be had. But what I'm here to tell you is they're all around us, and there are paths out of here if you're willing to take them. We have to begin with the work, the hard work it takes. And when I was a kid, my dad, he couldn't afford a whole bunch of stuff. So I used to go to work with him. We would process the fish all day and deliver it places all over the world. And for the first few years, I used to work I had scales coming off my arms at night. There's not enough Old Spice in the world to get the stench off of you. But I did it for the first few years, and I never got paid. I just thought it was something you do to go with your dad to work. We got up at 4:30 every morning. Got back at night, sometimes right before the sun, and that's sunset, and that's like in the summertime, so we're talking late. Other times, I got a little bit of sun time, and I could go out and play sports with my friends and stuff. Ultimately, later in life, that company became bigger, offshot to something different, and I went back to work in the summers when I was not in school, and I drove my own car because I had sports after. And, but those, we're talking $3 to $4 an hour I used to make. So what it was doing back then is it gave me something to do and realize what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to work in a cooler inside my whole life with fishy, stinky, the same stories being told, the same people over and over and over. Nothing wrong with these people, salt of the earth. I love them, but it wasn't for me. I wanted to do something more meaningful with life, whatever the hell that was. I didn't know at the time. I was a kid. What the hell do I know? I wanted to play baseball or basketball for a living, or maybe even football. I mean, that's what I used to do. So that's what I did. Um, but I'll tell you one thing it did. It made me take school more seriously. I realized if I wanted to be like my dad, which was a great thing because he was one of the hardest workers I knew, I wanted to take that part of him, but then add the other part, which was the artistic side that my mom gave me and the love for nature and animals and the world that the hippie generation from the 60s, my mom, who was right in there, gave me. So I had this dad on one hand was pragmatic and paid bills and went to work and no one worked harder. And I had this, well, like, I got to throw my mom in there a little bit. She worked at a leather store. She worked in a health food store as well. I think I mentioned that earlier. So there's a combination of things, and it used to bang heads all the time. I don't want to do this, but yet how do I get over there? How do I do what I want to do? So I knew it was something more artsy. I knew if I wasn't playing professional sports somehow, I was going to be doing something that seemed that fulfilled me in a way that I felt like, hey, I'm getting paid to play, whatever that is. So I wasn't even quite sure that. So I treated every job as a boot camp. So in today's economy, with some of the lowest unemployment we've ever had, there are jobs everywhere. We can all find them. We may not like them. Um, we may hate them. I've despised most of my jobs, but every single one of them teaches you so much. And the worse it seems to be, the more it teaches you and the more it drives you. And when we lose our drive and we lose that independence of freedom, of what inspires us, that combination is dangerous. So we want to make sure we apply them both. So you're probably going, what the hell is he talking about? I'm living in some shithole in the city. I can't, every time I walk down the street, there's gangs telling me to, there's fast food on every corner. There's stores, there's bookstores, well, maybe not bookstores anymore. I don't know if they're out there, but there's plenty to do. And if you go to any employer, take 10 places you might want to work as a kid and say, sure, I'd love to work for you. I don't know if you're hiring, but what can you do? What's your expertise? You don't have to say anything other than that. I promise I'll get here on time, maybe early, and I'll stay as late as you want. People ain't doing that no more. They don't have to. They can sit in their mother's basements or their dad's basements and play Xbox, and seems like, that's okay with people these days. You're not considered a loser if you do that. You're not considered somebody. What they're doing is they're enabling you for a life of misery and loneliness. Listen, we were born hunters and gatherers. Our DNA is to create shelter and warmth and family and feed ourselves. And when we can do that and help others do that, feeling an ancient part of us that we've always done. It's the primary reason for being is to find meaning in life and to find meaning in helping people. So start by finding things that you don't want to do until you stumble on something you do want to do, and then let's create a path to get there. I'll briefly explain my path just so you can kind of see. But again, I come from a blue-collar family, pretty poor family back east that, kind of worked their way up through the ladder over years and didn't really make it until I was pretty much out of college. And then things started to click a little bit. And then I was on my own anyway. So I've worked every job unimaginable. I've when I say go knock on a door, when my baseball career ended, and I blew my elbow for the third time and I couldn't pitch anymore, and the love of my life decided that wasn't because of baseball, that we were just too young to be together, and a few other things happened during that time. I just went through this little mini depression, and it was right in that time frame. So I just went to a shipyard with the help of someone I knew very well, and gave me the introduction, and met with the head of the shipyard and basically said, what can you do? I says, I'll get there early, I'll stay late. And I basically just said, listen, come back in a week. If I'm not doing the things I said I was going to do, then just fire me. What do you have to lose? So off I went. $10.88 an hour later, I was on my way to, paying my apartment bill off and electricity and car insurance and things like that. But more importantly, I was given some really tough things to do, some things that nobody else wanted to do since I was a new guy on the block. And I never took this as something like as disparaging, or I just took it in stride. And I guess I'll explain what a shipyard is. It's not just, well, it's a place where you fix ships. We have two different kind of dry docks there. We had the graving dock that was shaped like a little V, and it had these doors, and you crank these holes in the doors with windows that open actually, and water would shoot in and fill this whole huge place up. We'd have tugboats come in, maybe Coast Guard trawlers and those kind of things are there. And then we had the big, huge floating dry docks that were these big U's that were like major ships could go in there. So you'd pump the water out, and the dock would come up with a boat. So basically, you take the water in there, fill up the big empty caverns, the chambers, and it would sink the boat. You just float the boat in there, set the blocks, which are these cement blocks with wood on top, and then you would raise it back up, and the ship would come up and be dry. So from there, you would do all kinds of work, depending on what the contract was. In most cases, it was just huge sheets of metal that got torn apart or needed work, or replacing zinc plates or things like that. But how they would do that is take these huge plates of metal to weld together, is you had to get these smaller pieces that were about the size of this big, about this thick, by about that deep. And you'd tack these down, and then all over the place, and you'd hold these huge pieces of metal that were held by a crane, and we would hold it up until these things were all tacked down by the welders. And when they would finish the beating and they would get that perfect, they would send me down and say, okay, that whole place is yours, go get it. So for the next several days, I would be grinding off that they call these scabs, because they would take these pieces of metal that held the two big pieces together and just knock them off with hammers, bing, bing, off. But it would leave these scabs really thick, like this long on each side. And they give you a grinder and a bunch of extension cords, which was particularly fun when it rained out. I mean, it was just, OSHA was not running around there protecting my butt. But it was all kinds of weather, it didn't matter. And if you've ever been in a dry dock and you see these blocks, they're only about 4.5 feet high. So when you're underneath, you're looking at about 4.5 feet, maybe 5 feet. I'm 6'3", so I'm constantly grinding above me, okay? And your arms are shaking. I'm not complaining. It's just, this is what happens to this kind of work. And you're grinding these scabs down until they're smooth. So when they paint over them, you don't even know that they were there. And then that wasn't even close to the worst stuff. I would have to go and muck. Mucking is taking mud out of a barge that was filling up in these what do you call them? They're just these little, again, sections that keep the barges afloat. Every boat has these where they're separated from each other, and so if one filled up with water, the whole thing just didn't go down. But it was filled up with this mud, and a chamber of hell that was 4.5, 5 feet high for a 6'3" guy. You crawl down this little porthole, and you pitch dark with your little headlight on, and stinks and dirty air, this like stale air. The heat comes in, it bakes through the metal, goes through this layer of grease that's like this thick. They use that so the salt water wouldn't corrode the metal. And you just start digging muck into a bucket, pull it to the hole, some guy pulls it up, or you lift it up and put it out there, and they send you more down, and you're doing that, could be for weeks. And so you go into a situation like that, you begin to ask yourself questions. How did I get here? So we're seeing the comparisons. You're you're in hell, you're in your hell, which could be a jail cell, it could be a juvie, it could be anywhere. Like how that, what the, well, you start to do some self-reflection, and hard work will do that for you. Being alone will do that for you. Getting away from all the electronics in your life, getting away from the chaos is going to force you to think inward, and you're going to start identifying who those people are in your life who are there to help you, and help is a be the best version of who you are. And there are other people who are takers who will pretend to be your best friend or your friends, and they're there really to prey off of you in one way or another. So it's kind of hard to identify as people because we all want to be liked when we're kids. I remember that deeply. I never felt like I fit in, and I didn't trust a whole bunch of people. I didn't trust hardly anybody actually. So I had to work through that, and that's why jumping into your soul, into your heart, into the dark places that we tend to not want to go into because they're scary and we don't like what we see. We see a lot of the stuff as some poor choices on our behalf, even though we were raised in horrific, not ideal, perfect situations. Let's put it that way, okay? Because everyone's getting different there. So that shipyard was basically a great barometer for me to work and figure out where I was, to know where I wanted to go. It wasn't just something I did to say, hey, I'm making a few extra bucks, got my apartment covered, got my car payment covered, I got my whatever bills covered, let's go party, man. Well, no one liked happy hour more than me, or having a few beers, but there's a bigger goal here, and you can still do that fun stuff, but to me the biggest goal, and what helped me the most, is I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want someone else running my life. So that, again, I'm going to keep referring it to FU fund, was my goal. I just wanted some kind of independence, so that people call it rainy day funds. I wanted it like so that I could control my own life. And it's not something you're going to do overnight, but you're going to start putting the pieces together for that. And that's some serious medicine. That's how you start becoming autonomous from all of the people and all the things that you see on TV and everything that's telling you you're not capable of doing what you want to do, so you may as well follow us. Follow your own trail. But the thing I didn't do is I didn't upgrade my car. I didn't upgrade anything that I didn't have to. We have wants and we have needs. My need was to build the FU fund, and I know you don't do that on a shipyard job, making close to, at that point, that minimum wage. But it gave me a sense of where I was going and where I was. And when you have a sheet of paper that says, here's the money coming in every month, and you got this sheet of paper over there that says, this is what's going out, you can start to play games with, oh, this is how much extra I have. How can I do better next month? What less can I do? What more do I think I need, but I don't, but I want? And I can cut that out until later on when it doesn't hurt me so much. Because ultimately, I didn't want to be in a shipyard my whole life. I didn't want to, nothing wrong with it. I just wanted something bigger, something more meaningful. And this was a great vehicle, a great place to start and to show me where I stood and where I was going. And that's where it really comes down to. A year and a half went by, and I was now doing salvage diving for them. I was cutting underwater with magnesium rods that are as long as me, cutting through metal this thick. I was welding. I was doing all this stuff without any licenses. So a kid that walked in who didn't know what he wanted to do other than just, I need to work hard, I need to make a few bucks so I can go on to the next stage of my life. Well, that turned into a career if I wanted it, because they were going to send me to get Navy Coast Guard certified to get all this stuff done. So they were going to spend a lot of money on me and give me the opportunity to become a lifer there and make a lot of money and become, I think the man that owned this place, well, I know he did. He actually got the contract for the big dig in Boston. So I would have been high on that scale of people doing things. wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't about the money at that point. It was about what am I going to do for my life down the line that makes me feel me, whatever the hell that is. And I wasn't even sure at that point what it was. So I told me to think about it. So the solutions to my conundrum at this point in my life did not lack a plethora of advice as voices emerging from, I guess, my echo chamber, which we all have. We all have our places that we make us feel comfortable, that agree with us more than not, who aren't willing to really challenge us because of the idea that they could lose something versus gain something. And that's a whole different conversation. But I just, for once in my life, for the first time in my life, the very first, I need to immerse myself into a place where I could be away from all that noise. And the best place I could think of was just a long road trip, but I didn't think that was going to be enough. So I thought, at this point in my life, I'm at these crossroads, saved enough money, let's put some of that money to use and invest in myself and go someplace that made myself feel very uncomfortable. At the same time, allow myself to enjoy it, meaning a place that I've always wanted to go, a place that I knew nothing really about other than the history books, and that I had an idea was pretty beautiful. At the time, was very inexpensive, and that I could basically backpack my way through. So I did that. I packed the car up. I took a long trip across the country, and I had some silence, and I had some time to think, and I had to get to know myself all over again. So this was really, really good for me, and it was good for the situation. And I can see easily how that kind of situation can be very hard to attain today because we're all so connected. So the point here is I was able to disconnect. And I got a lot accomplished during that trip. And then I actually got an airplane and went to Greece and bummed around those islands and packed my paintbrushes and explored places that I wasn't quite sure what would happen, where I would go, even where I would stay, how I would be able to communicate. I wanted to put myself in situations that were uncomfortable to see what I was capable of working myself through. And most of life, to me, and what I've gained from this is just that. If you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to be something bigger than what I guess society really wants you to be, you have to be a problem solver. And you can't solve problems if someone else is always trying to give you the answers. So I immersed myself into this deeply, and I had some fun along the way as well, of course. In my mid-20s, I'm not going to squander that. But ultimately, I came back completely recharged and had a sense of direction in my life. And I understood from that point on, I was going to walk my own path. And I was going to learn from every time I strayed off of it. Or even if my path that I thought I was on was taking me in the spot I wanted to go was not correct. I didn't bury it. I didn't hide it. I didn't excuse it. I just learned from it. And I'm still learning from it to this day, years and years later. But I knew I had to accelerate my level of making money so that I could get to that point. So another boot camp down the drain. I thanked them. I just didn't want to be a lifer in a shipyard, and I would have felt compelled because, again, when somebody sets you up and is going to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on your education, you're beholden to them. At least if you have a heart and you have a conscience, you are. If you just take it and run, I mean, I don't know what kind of person that makes us, but it just isn't the way I operate. So I thanked them and went to bartending, and then I did some security work. And again, that's not the career, but it just was to re-gauge myself and settle in. And I stayed in LA. I got to Boston, and an opportunity came by to work as a salesman. I know. Ugh, hate the word. I said all you can think is that cheesy car salesman guy, and and I just didn't want any part of it. But so I said no. I actually interviewed for the job, and here's a great tip if you're a kid and you're interviewing for a job, and it worked for me even though I didn't take this particular job. And I wasn't sure at this point that I still wanted the job, so I was still gunning for the job. But if you want a job that you really don't think you get, write a little note and how much you appreciate that person, the time they took to take with you, and that you're going to be the best asset they've ever had. Tom Brady walked in as a 6th-round draft pick of the New England Patriots, and he went right up to Bob Kraft and he says, "Hi, I'm Tom Brady." He goes, "I know who you are." He goes, "No, you don't. What you're going to know is I'm the best decision you ever made in your life." How can a CEO not pay attention to that? Have that confidence about yourself and know that you can do this and run with it. And so I had to decline the job because the next day the guy called. I went home that night. I slept on it. He had all this enthusiasm, and it had left me. I didn't want to be a salesman, so I thanked him again for it. And I just went my way. I kept bartending and back to security. About 6-7 months later, someone from that same company talked me into coming back and doing it again. And this time I accepted because I think they were successful in explaining to me that being a good salesman was more of an information giver. It wasn't like telling somebody they needed to do something that they didn't want to do. It wasn't like tricking somebody. It wasn't feeling regretful over something. It was actually bringing somebody the idea that you can help their lives and their families become better at doing what they do in virtue of what you're giving them, and it's a symbiotic relationship. So I jumped into that, and I bounced around for a few companies, but I got to tell you, for the next 17 years, that's what I did. Now, it was fun in the beginning. I got to meet people. We started making a few bucks, and I started putting it away. And that's the key. The biggest thing that I used to get made fun of when I started making real money was the parking lot. I used to pull in a parking lot, and there was only BMWs, Mercedes, Jaguars. It was in the best ones of each. And I pulled in with I went to a Lexus lot, and I liked them. I test drove one. There was a G300 or something back in the day I loved, or something 300. And I was ready to buy it. I remember it was like $42,500. Like, oh my God, for a car. I mean, my dad bought his house for that exact amount of money. Actually, cheaper, 42 grand. And I couldn't put that by my head. So I said, just tell me with this Lexus, what's the same version in a Toyota model? Like, meaning you're the same company. So if I was to get the same engine, the same seats, the same chassis, the same everything, what would it be? And they said the Toyota Avalon XLS. So I said, well, how much does that cost? You can see the guy's heart sank. I said, listen, you might as well show it to me now. I'll get somebody else too. And it was $28,000. So what's the difference? Same engine, same leather seats, same chassis, same everything. There was some lights, there were some headlights and rear lights, I think, different. I still had the JBL. I had the nice sound system. I had all that stuff. There were a few minor things, but the big thing was the L. There was no L. It was that Toyota thing. So I drove in happy as a clam. I've never owned a car like that in my life. It was like this thing drove like so smooth, and it was the same car I test drove as a Lexus, and I saved myself, 13, 14, 15 grand right there, depending on taxes and all that garbage. So I used to get made fun of constantly. When are you going to get a big boy car? That's the kind of car you see in a dictionary next to car and whatever. Well, today is, that was 2002. That's when I first got my real first car before that was all Jeeps and stuff. I still own that car. It's 2019. I won't give it up. I have a truck, but I have that car. So these are the types of things that I do, because that 12 to 15 grand to me was my middle finger to that company if they decided to get rid of me one day when they didn't need me, or they decided to downsize, or they decided to give all my accounts to some flunky because they wanted to save a couple hundred grand on commissions. And that's what happened years later. But I never burned bridges. There's some good people there, and I understand why they did what they did. But the whole point is, my goal to get where I wanted to get was truly, and what was becoming defining in my soul as I was growing older, was I wanted freedom. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. Now, again, we all want to do different things, but what I wanted to do was to be able to support myself without worry and help others. How the hell do you help others in this market? How do you? Well, you can. This market's pretty damn good. Our economy is booming. You can get out of our comfort zones. You can start humbly, and that key word humble, and stay humble. You're going to find your way through life. People will be attracted to you. People are going to want to help you out. And find out where you're standing, where those 2 feet are, so you can aim where you want to go. And if that changes, you just change with the route you want to take, not the route someone else wants you to take. So for me, I've really come enamored with with connecting again with nature big time, and because I think that's where we came from, and I think that's where we feel most connected with ourselves and others. It seems weird because sometimes you're alone, but when you take all this hardwire stuff and all this crap out of our existence, things become clear. And when they become clear, they become easy to manage, and your life can then become something you do to enhance another's. And that's the real magic for me. So I find I go back to manual labor lately to actually clear out thoughts. And I'm doing this now here in Redondo Beach. But my sanctuary, the place I go, the place that I love to really iron out my issues, is up in my property up in Idaho, just outside of Yellowstone. And you've seen from other videos what that looks like. And it's just a raw piece of land off grid with a beautiful view of a lake and a mountain behind me, Yellowstone. And it forces me to stay warm. I'm staying fed, staying dry, staying happy, being social with people, listening to music, staying off the TV. Those things that there's. Come on, we all know that there's people who are sending waves of messages through our systems and our bodies that are meant for us. They're meant for them. It's meant for us being, I hate the useful idiot term, but that's what keeps popping into my head. I mean, just a bunch of lemmings marching off the edge of the cliffs. It's just one after another. And we're not our own people anymore. You need to get that back. I get it. It's next to impossible when you're heading into your 20s and you're not there yet, and you're wondering how you're even going to survive right here and now. Never mind talk about what your life looks like into your 30s and into your 40s, and then later on from there. So you're in survival mode, and I understand that completely. There's so many things you can do, though, to help you through that. Things that I don't think schools are teaching kids to, about debt, trading in the things that you need for things you want, and you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball at ridiculous interest rates that are there, and they're meant to keep you there, trapped in a place that looks hopeless and no escape. And put that FU fund together. And don't let the people in your life who are there to constantly bring you down or tell you that you're not worth it. You are. You're worth everything. your future, and if there's any way I can suggest or help with anything, I'd be happy to. I just don't. I'm not no expert. I'm not. I guess the person I would say to it wouldn't even be me. Go look at Mike Rowe. Go look at his website. He's talking about all these dirty jobs people do. Do you know that all these dirty jobs that on his show, these people who are they're doing all kinds of crazy shit. They're cleaning out toilets. They're castrating cows. These are all millionaires, by the way. They're not dirty jobs going home to a van living on the side of a beach. They're millionaires, and they're all doing great. So find what that is. If you don't like it, use it for your next step. If that doesn't work, use it for your next step. But as long as you stay on that treadmill, your treadmill, not theirs, yours, big difference, you're going to be just fine. And the people around you are going to be attracted to that, the right people. So good luck with that.
I should know who I am by now. I walk the record stand somehow, thinking of winter. My name is the splinter inside me.